today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Another look at what could be the Baumgardner versus Dubois fight. Caroline Dubois' continued callouts of Alicia Baumgardner on social media saying, "I know if me and Alicia fought, I'm taking her out. Definitely not going the distance. The procedure would not be parliamentary."
Really? Then why didn't you knock out Yanina Lescano? Why didn't you knock out Baumgardner Shin? Those are much easier targets to land on than Alicia. These hyperbolic comments are intended to sell the fight, if and when the time comes. But do I actually think Carolyn would knock her out?
No.
Hakan Johansson responded to Carolyn's comments saying Alicia Baumgardner already has a fight signed for July 11th. More interesting is what's next for you, and will you be back in less than 6 months? To which Carolyn responded, "I'm not saying that fight is next. It most definitely won't be. I'm just letting people know what would happen when it does. But I'm working on securing a unification in the summer."
Two of the other champions at the weight are already spoken for. Terry Harper is going to be fighting next month.
Late next month on the 23rd, so I don't think it's going to be Terry. I don't think it's going to be Stephanie Hahn, WBA champion Stephanie Hahn, who's supposed to be returning in July against an opponent that has yet to be announced.
If what you're talking about is a summer fight, a summer unification match, that's pretty tight for those fighters. Tight enough that I'm not sure they're available, leaving only Beatriz Ferreira, who Carolyn has spent a long time avoiding. But at the same time, she's the only champion that's available for a summer showdown, a summer shootout, that if Boxer makes the offer, I believe Beatriz will oblige them, and I believe that Matchroom won't stand in the way. If Beatriz has to cross the street for that fight, they'll let her.
What about Alicia?
I don't know what the ETA on a Baumgardner versus Dubois fight is, but what this speaks to is what I talked about in my previous video. The situation that Clarissa finds herself in those barren weight classes, and how there's nobody up there for her to fight. There's nobody up there the audience wants her to fight because the audience doesn't know anybody up there. Whereas at the lower weights, like 130 and 135, you have a fight like this that has the potential to be the biggest fight anywhere at or around these weights when the time comes. It's important that the audience know who the fighters are.
Otherwise, there is no grassroots demand. One of the mistakes I think that Showtime made when they signed Clarissa Shields, because at the start of her career, that's where she started. That's who she started with. Is she was the only fighter that they signed.
ESPN goes into business with a Top Rank. DAZN goes into business with a Matchroom or a Queensbury, a Golden Boy. And what you have is an entire stable of fighters fighting on the platform, an entire assembly line of fighters. Whereas when Showtime signed Clarissa, they only signed Clarissa. They didn't sign other fighters at or around those weights, like Raquel Miller, Franchon Cruz, Christina Hammer.
By the time Clarissa fought Christina, the audience barely knew her. They had only seen her fight once, if that.
The mistake is that while you can be invested in one of these fighters more than the others, you still have to build the other fighters up, so that by the time they fight Clarissa, it means something, it's worth something, and the audience is familiar with the fighters. One of Clarissa's biggest problems is half the time, nobody knows who these girls are. Alicia doesn't have that problem.
And this is what I mean. Not saying that Caroline Dubois is a household name yet, because she isn't. But more people know Caroline than they know Clarissa's opponents. More people know Alicia.
More people know them than they knew who Danielle Perkins was, or Vanessa Joanese, Maricela Cornejo.
More people know them, so that if they fight each other, it's going to get people's attention.
Whatever fans Caroline has amassed in the United Kingdom that are likely to get behind her off of nationalism alone, and whatever fans Alicia has in the United States, her supporters, as she is the more established name and is set to be fighting on a very big platform moving forward, so that by the time they fight, the fight is worth something. It's important to know who the fighters are.
Now, addressing her hyperbolic comments about how she's going to knock Alicia out, you can see who she gets her cues from. She gets her cues from Clarissa.
She wants to be brash and outspoken, loud, like Clarissa.
Whatever.
All I know is you fought two lesser fighters than Alicia Baumgardner, and you didn't knock them out. You didn't stop them. Those fighters are a lot easier to land on than she is. And if landing flush power shots on them did not end in a knockout, I hardly think a Baumgardner fight ends in a knockout because she's trickier, harder to hit, with power of her own.
I would bet that Alicia knocks you out before you knock her out.
Men's heavyweight news. I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois rematch is set for undisputed heavyweight title fight at Wembley, July 19th.
Two boys met earlier today and things got a little bit testy at the face-off. Daniel Dubois shoved Alexander Usyk, angry at how the first fight ended. In his own mind, he still thinks he was robbed of the victory, and the subject itself is still contentious. Some people still think it was a legal punch, while others think it was a low blow.
News of the rematch broke this past Sunday that the unbeaten Ukrainian would defend his heavyweight throne against the Brit, Dubois, on British soil in London, England. So once again, Alexander Usyk is the away fighter, which would be cause for concern if he didn't spend every single title fight he's ever been in on the road.
As the away fighter.
Now, Daniel will have home field advantage, and I'm sure that that's going to come with its perks. Since it's Queensbury promoting the show, they're going to do whatever they have to do for Daniel. I don't dismiss that. The first time out, it was not Queensbury at the helm of the promotion. It was actually Usyk's people that were at the helm of the promotion. They won the purse bid, whereas things are a little bit different now. And Daniel Dubois means a lot more to Queensbury's bottom line than he did before.
Why?
Nobody really liked his chances before against Usyk, whereas since then, he's amassed a string of victories and seemingly reinvented himself to where now he's viewed as a more formidable adversary. The controversy about the Beltline shot.
The low blow.
The UK boxing scene is still buzzing after the world saw Eubank versus Ben throw hands from round 1 until the last second of the 12th round, with their legendary fathers, Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn, both in attendance, ultimately seeing Eubank Jr. claim a unanimous decision victory, and the British boxing fans are in for yet another treat as two world heavyweight champions collide this summer.
Accenting what I've been saying for years, the British boxing boom and the British boxing scene is a more fertile environment for the sport. The fans there are much more receptive than the pompous fans you find here.
The assholes. This fight comes after the WBO had ordered Usyk, who holds the WBO, WBA, and WBC heavyweight world titles, to defend his belts against WBO interim champion Joseph Parker. However, an exception was lodged earlier in April on behalf of Usyk and Dubois for their blockbuster clash to take precedent.
WBO President Gustavo Olivieri provided some clarity, saying the WBO heavyweight mandatory, having carefully considered the arguments presented by all the relevant parties regarding the WBO mandatory, it is the WBO's position that the best interests of boxing, and most importantly the fighters themselves, are best served by allowing the unification bout to proceed. Prior to discharging the mandatory obligation. In doing so, the division will once again crown an undisputed champion, elevating the sport and its athletes to the highest standard. It is further clarified that Joseph Parker's mandatory status is upheld, and he remains next in the rotation system following the unification.
If you're wondering what rotation system he's talking about, it's the one that all the sanctioning bodies abide by whenever there is a unified or undisputed champion. The rotation system, the World Boxing Council chose to circumvent in the case of Dimitri Bivol and David Benavidez in the light heavyweight division, the rotation system that is still intact at heavyweight.
It's a practicality. When you have a guy holding more than one belt, you shouldn't just paint him into a corner because you feel like it.
Like what the World Boxing Council did to Dimitri Bivol, knowing they were not next in the rotation and he was committed to a better beef trilogy. Gustavo Olivieri is proving himself already a more sound,
a more capable president of a sanctioning body than Mauricio Suleiman, who seems to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants to, with impunity.
That fat bastard.
Daniel Dubois has improved tremendously, winning 3 straight fights via stoppage against Jarrell Miller, Filip Hrgovic, where he won the vacant IBF interim title, and then the emphatic knockout of Anthony Joshua at Wembley last September. Meanwhile, Usyk has etched his name into the history books since their previous fight. The 38-year-old made history in May of 2024 when he beat Tyson Fury to become the first undisputed heavyweight champion of the four-belt era.
He sent Daniel Dubois a message ahead of the rematch. With Usyk tied into a rematch with Tyson Fury back in December of 2024, he was forced into relinquishing his IBF title, as he could not take his mandatory defense of the belt whilst preparing for Fury. This allowed Dubois and Anthony Joshua to fight for the full version of the title in September, where he ultimately came out victorious. Usyk was frustrated to give up his IBF title, and now he has the chance to get it back. I'm grateful to God for the opportunity to once again fight for the undisputed championship, Usyk said. Thank you, Daniel, for taking care of my IBF belt. Now, I want it back. The first bout certainly had controversy between Usyk and Dubois before the stoppage. A punch from Dubois that was judged low saw the Ukrainian champion hit the deck as he winced in pain. This sparked a global debate on social media as fans began to analyze slow-motion replays and still images to see if it was indeed low. The reality is, the man whose opinion that counts is the referee. He deemed it to be an illegal shot.
It was.
Of course, Dubois' team still argue that it was a legitimate punch, but he will get his chance to avenge his loss in a few months' time. Despite being 38 years of age, 11 years older than Daniel, and naturally the much smaller man, the bookies have got Usyk as a huge favorite in the rematch against Daniel. However, with boxing forever being known as a young man's sport, many are beginning to question just how much longer does the modern-day legend have left in the tank.
They don't appreciate this guy Usyk is what I see.
He doesn't really have to fight Daniel again for undisputed. So many fighters don't fight for undisputed once. This guy's willing to do it twice. And in Daniel's neck of the woods,
This will be the third time he's fought for undisputed. The first was at cruiser.
the second was at heavy, and this will be the third time overall. And he could have demanded that the fight happen at a more neutral location, not concede home field advantage to Daniel.
They're gonna try to screw him. You know they are.
Especially when they're the ones running with the narrative that they were robbed in Poland, that was a legal punch.
They knew what they were doing, and I've maintained that throughout.
Veteran boxing scribe Dan Raphael seems to be of a similar mindset. He posted this still image of Daniel Dubois in the first fight, clearly going for the groin.
With a caption that reads, "One of the various low blows Dubois hit Usyk with."
I'm of the opinion that it was all intentional. It was all deliberate. He was instructed to do so to take away Usyk's legs by both Don Charles and James Ali Bashir, who was in Daniel's corner and spent some time with Usyk in previous years. I'm of the opinion Daniel knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he was aiming low.
You weren't robbed of anything. You thought you could get away with it.
Look at the image. Look at the goddamn picture. What the hell was Daniel aiming for, if not this guy's nuts?
And the infamous borderline shot. You have to understand that Daniel Dubois is taller than Oleksandr Usyk. Noticeably taller, noticeably bigger. So why would he come in that low with an uppercut if he wasn't aiming for this guy's family jewels?
Well, you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're being obtuse, because this guy literally bended at the waist, bended at the knees, scooped the uppercut from below.
That wasn't intentional, though.
So you're gonna tell me, well, things happen in the heat of the moment. The referee's judgment call was made in the heat of the moment. It was made in a split second, but for some reason, you guys are blaming Usyk, as if it were up to him. I saw veteran boxing scribe Adam Catterall say, whoever convinced Daniel Dubois that he nearly had Usyk in the first fight needs a pay raise. It's bullshit. He was comprehensively beaten, and it was a low blow. But him believing that bullshit has made him. Usyk is still a massive favorite, but this confident Dubois presents an improved problem.
Well, I don't dismiss that. That Daniel Dubois is a lot less reserved than he used to be. He's more confident after that string of victories, as he should be. Jarrell Miller.
Unbeaten Jarrell Miller. Unbeaten Filip Hrgovic. Anthony Joshua in a fight that Daniel was widely favored to lose. He has every reason to be riding high. The problem is, none of those guys are anything like Usyk. Usyk has seen you before. He's beat you before.
You're more confident than you used to be, but are you actually improved?
Another perspective on Daniel's quote-unquote improvements is that he's more reckless. He takes more chances to land big punches. It's worked for him. Worked for him so far with more limited fighters and slower fighters than Alexander Usyk. I understand that he is 38 years old, but I also understand that most of these guys up there move like they're 38 years old, even when they're not.
Most of them are slow. Who are you talking about, Jarrell Miller? The guy's over 300 pounds. Filip Prgovic? He moves slow as molasses.
Anthony? I don't know what the hell was wrong with Anthony. I don't know what kind of game plan he had.
But none of these guys are Usyk. And even at 38 years old, he still has the best footwork in this division, and I think he's still fast enough that he's faster than them.
Still agile enough that he's more agile than them. I don't dismiss his age. It's entirely possible that Father Time could catch up to him during this fight. But it's just as likely that because he beat Daniel before, he can beat him again. He did it to Fury.
Beat him 2 times, remember?
He did it to Anthony Joshua.
Beat him 2 times, remember?
That if history is any indicator of things to come, this is going to be a three-peat, because this is what Usyk does. Take on the toughest challenges as the away fighter, and somehow, some way, he still comes out on top.
What is the most literal incarnation of what a pound-for-pound fighter is supposed to be. Here you have a guy who doesn't have more size than his opponents, or more punching power. No real advantages, not even home field advantage.
He's winning these fights off of skill, not strength of arms.
That's lost on a lot of people, particularly the Americans, who don't like the idea of some blue-eyed Ukrainian being the pound-for-pound numero uno.
But this entire conversation about pound-for-pound is predicated that a fighter's skill can overcome another fighter's size. More specifically, a heavyweight, as it was thought that Sugar Ray Robinson, the poster child of the pound-for-pound, some say the father, even though he didn't have a heavyweight's size, with his skills, if he were a heavyweight, he would beat them too. That's what got the ball rolling. The difference between Sugar and Usyk is actually at heavyweight right now.
It's not a theory. It's not a postulation. He literally did it already.
What is the most literal iteration of what a pound-for-pound fighter is supposed to be since Roy Jones Jr. We don't have to prognosticate.
Postulate.
So, I don't expect much about Daniel's approach to change, and rematches are often won by the fighter who can.
Well, that's Usyk more than Daniel. What's Daniel gonna do? He's gonna try to knock him out? He tried that the first time.
Maybe he'll get off to a faster start this time and take more chances, but that makes him easier to counter, doesn't it?
And this is a guy who got stopped by a jab.